Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew D. Rhodes, and welcome to LPA Presents, where we explore the stories behind the entertainment we love. Today's episode is particularly special to me because I'm sitting down with Matthew Harlin, the talented producer who brought my book to life in its audiobook format. Matthew and I have worked closely on this project, and I'm excited to share with you not just the process, but also the passion and creativity that went into making this audiobook. So let's dive into our conversation and get a behind the scenes look at how it all came together. How are you doing today, Matthew?
I'm doing fantastic today, Matt. How about yourself?
I'm good.
Good, good.
What drew you into this audiobook project initially?
So this one really got me interested when I saw the audition script, and then typically when I see the audition scripts, if I've got ones that are going to be a little bit longer, I actually do some research on the book itself. So, I'll look up the book itself. I'll read the synopsis of it. I'll read some of the excerpts. I'll look at the reviews. And so really, this book in particular, I come from a virtual reality background. I was actually with a company that we created a virtual reality game back in, oh man, this was probably back in 2014 or 2015. So early on in the virtual reality realm. And so, I knew the virtual reality. So, that one really was really close to my heart. And so when I read the synopsis, read the storyline from it, that's really what drew me in. And then the storyline of the possibilities that it could go to is really what got me interested in auditioning for it in the first place. And that really drew my eye.
But were you expecting the concept of the full dive, kind of like Sword Art Online?
No, I wasn't. That was just a what I'll call a bonus, an added bonus. Was as I got into the first read because part of my process for this is once I get it, sign the contract, we go through, I'll actually read the full story. So I'll read it from a reader's perspective. And so, obviously I'll take a little bit more time than a normal reader would because I'm thinking about what that character is going to be like, what they're going to be at the initial, what it would sound like, some of their interactions. So I'll take a little bit more time. But as I was diving into this, as the story grew, as the characters grew, and then the deep dive got it, and then once the storyline could, you just get me deeper and deeper into it. So really fell in love with the characters, fell in love with the storyline, and got me super excited about it.
Can you walk us through your process of adapting a written book into an audiobook?
Yeah, so for me, it's trying to put myself into the shoes of the characters. That's really where, I like to take the time. I'll do some notes as I'm going through with some of the characters early on. It changes, but I'll have some notes on what they may sound like, what their background are. The other thing I'll try to do is if I don't relate to one personally, like myself with my actions, my background, my story, my life, I'll find somebody in my life that I can relate that to, whether it's a sibling, whether it's my wife, whether it's, family members, friends. I'll be like, okay, this reminds me of Alvin. And so that puts that character in it. And that, since I've got that relationship with the real life people, the real life characters, I can understand what they would do or how they would act. And I try to put myself into their shoes. And that's really how I try to differentiate the characters, not only just the tone of voice and the sounding, but the articulation, the body, the movement of myself when I'm in my studio going through. I'll try to get some of their body language that goes into it. And that's really how I get myself into those characters.
And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about the way that you portray the characters compared to the narrative.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's, I've done a lot of audiobooks, listened to a lot of audiobooks. You've got different narrators that'll do a more of a monotone, even for the characters themselves. But the ones that I fell in love with, the ones that really got me motivated to become a voice actor, to do the audiobooks, were the ones where you could tell just by listening to the narrator who the character was, like just by their tone of voice, just by them. And that's something that really is deep down to my heart, that I love to do. Is so you're listening to it and you're like, oh, I know, before you don't even have to tell me that was Skolder. I knew that was Skolder based on the narrator's voice. So that's great to hear. I love that feedback.
What were some of the unique challenges you faced with this particular book?
Unique challenges that I faced. A lot of them where, like Malinzi being male in the real world and a female character in there, and jumping back and forth, by still trying to keep her personality, her persona, because while it does change when she goes into the dive, she's still got a lot of Matthew in her. And so, trying to go back and forth, I wanted to keep them to where, yes, her personality and demeanor changes to where she's got that more confident, that more assertiveness, even though it's more feminine. But being able to bring that back and forth, that was a big challenge, especially early on, until she grew on me, until she, I was able to just, it came out real natural, by about I'd probably say about 3/4 of the way through part one. Really, when you start to really feel the characters really get that. But that was one of the more, I would say, challenging runs with this book in particular. But it was also the fun, because you could feel the difference. And when she was in her the real world, the base reality versus inside of the dive, it was, mentally a struggle for her as well. And so it was fun to go back and forth and really play off of those emotions.
Yeah, I know I had some feedback about part one not having enough action and relying too much on how the characters interact with each other, but that's the problem. Or that's the focal point of part one, is their interactions with trying to survive. I mean, you read part two. It was more action oriented, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, especially if it's going to be a 3 or 4 book series, you've got to invest that time into it, to really pull those characters together, because otherwise you're going to lose that. Or by the time you get into book 2 or book 3, if you're having to go back now and tell more of the stories about the characters, you're losing that action, and that's when it can kind of slow down. That's what I tell everybody is, especially for some of the novels series that I grew up on, even the Lord of the Rings, your Aragon series. Aragon's a big one. I loved the Aragon series. The books 1 and books 2 are what you would consider slower, but that's because you're deep diving, so that when you can get into the end of book 2, book 3, book 4, you can have it be as much action packed, because those characters by then.
What role does pacing play in the production of an audiobook?
So pacing is huge. Pacing is everything. It came back from your and I's first interaction, Matthew, when, even back during my audition. Some books you want them to be a higher paced, faster. I found with, children's books, you want that higher paced. They're not worried about what did they just, what was the implications of a line they just heard. They're all about their imagination and their storyline, and they're just grabbing the words and what's the next word. So you can have that faster pace. But in a novel such as this, especially the fantasy world or your deep diving, you want to give the readers a chance to digest what they just heard. Especially, that's where I find myself, especially early on during my editing, is I'll record a section, and if there's a sentence, and at the time that I record it, I probably went through faster than it really should have.
Right.
And then during my editing portion, I'll be like, man, that sentence was deep, and I'll hear the pause, and it wasn't a long enough pause, even myself as a listener. So that's what I try to do when I'm editing, is now I'm going back. I'm no longer the narrator. I'm now the listener of the audiobooks that I love to listen to. And so I put that shoe on. And so I'll be like, man, that was a deep comment. And I've already started into the next sentence. And so I find myself going back and extending that pause. Still need some more here and there, but that's kind of where I find myself going to, is during the editing portion of that pace, and being able to speed up at times, slow down at times, but it also just how it resonates, how a certain line from a character resonates with the reader, how you want it to, how much time you want them to think about what was just said.
For those that are actually wanting to get into producing audiobooks, one thing I might recommend doing is, if you see a book with different sections per chapter, record just that section separately from everything else, move on to the next section, record it separately, and then connect them with a 5-second pause in between. It'll actually help in the long run.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that, Matthew, 100%.
How do you ensure consistency in tone and style throughout the entire production?
That's probably one of the harder ones, because as a even professionals, you only get a certain amount of time to sit down and record. I typically will try to do at least one chapter all in one sitting,
Mhm.
at a minimum. But then if there's sections where I can't do that, or if getting to where going from one chapter to the next chapter, what I find myself doing is I'll go back and spend the first 5 to 10 minutes listening to yesterday's recordings and hearing what my voice sounds like, hearing what the energy, really it's a lot about the energy level. And so I'll go back through and I'll remember what that energy looked like, what it felt like. There was even one where I had to go when I had to do the trip. So I went 2 to 3 days without recording anything in that time period in the middle of your book. I actually went back and re-recorded a 3 minute section of the recording I already did and listened to both of them just back to back to back to see if I matched the same. And I was like, oh, you know what? I had a slightly lower, no, it was a slightly higher tone than what I did the previous day, a couple of days before. So I went back and was able to record it. So for those getting into it, listen to 4 or 5 minutes of your previous recording. And that way you feel the tone, you feel the speed, the energy level to try to match it to go back through.
What kind of software or tools do you rely on during the production process?
Yep. So I use a software called Audacity.
Hmm.
So it's a free software. It got me started, but it does everything I need it to. So far, I haven't really delved into a whole lot of full mixing, adding music, going through and doing anything crazy fancy. But it's a free tool that's used, free software. There are a lot of training videos out there, so it's very user friendly, very easy to get started, and a lot with the audiobooks. There's not a lot of editing tools that are needed inside. You learn how to do noise canceling, so you'll take a portion of it, and you'll screenshot a portion that says, hey, any noise that was going on during this section was supposed to be silent, and it will actually find that same rhythm. So if you've got an air conditioner going in the background, or if there's just a resonant of the computer vibrations, it'll take that and remove it. That's one that I do on everything. And then some clipping, for clipping. So there's about 3 steps that I do for every recording, that I'll go through. But other than that, Audacity is fantastic. It's really easy to use. The clipping, the multiple tracks. So I definitely recommend it for anybody just getting started.
And there's one thing that people need to take into consideration is that the noise variance, not just what's in the background, but also when the microphone is silent, it's still recording a certain level of noise that shouldn't be there. And there's a way to get rid of that using Audacity.
Yep, exactly. That was the first thing that I learned, because my first couple recordings were in an airspace room where you could hear kind of the echoes and you could hear the ambience and you could hear that. But Audacity does a fantastic job of grasping that white noise and then getting rid of it. It's a really cool feature, and really easy to use. You do have to do it with every track that you record, but once you get it, it's become so natural that I've got a step by step that I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just like, all right, I click this button, I do this, I snip this, I do this. Now I can start listening to it.
And of course, what a lot of new people coming into audiobooks does not realize is there are certain settings that are required for the recording, or at least the compiling it in the end into the proper format, MP3, that it has to meet a certain frequency, a certain whatnot. People aren't reading into what ACX is actually telling them they need to do, and a lot of people will sometimes wonder why their audio is not coming out the way it should be, and it's just fine.
Yep. Yeah. So that's exactly it. But that's where a lot of those trainings that were on ACX and also on Audacity, they work together. They know each other. They work together, to help you build those settings at the beginning. And then ACX has this really cool feature. They call it the Audio Lab. There's an Audio Lab feature in Audacity where you can actually submit recordings It doesn't go to the author. It doesn't go to anybody. It doesn't get recorded. It doesn't matter what you put on there. You actually can upload it, and it does an automatic, basically a filter that says, is this to our standards? And so that's what I'll find myself doing every time before I send it to the author, before I upload it, before I do anything. You just send it in there. And if you want to just do a practice test, let's say I wanted to move my microphone back a little bit because I wanted a difference, or I wanted to take anything up or down and just wanted to do some tests, you can just fire those away into that, and it says, oh, you need to raise the decimal point by a little bit, or you've got too many peaks that are over a certain point that you need to remove. So it's a really cool feature and makes it really easy, especially for those first starting out.
Now, I'm noticing that you're using your typical headset, but that's not what you have in your professional setup, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. This is just the headset I usually do for just one-on-ones. I wish I had my microphone in front of me. No, I've got it's a Bode microphone that's usually sitting right in front of me. And then I have two monitors. I've got one monitor that's horizontal, that's got my Audacity in it. That's where I've got through just right on my left. And then what I found is I have a vertical screen that's right in front of me, that's right in front of my microphone. So my microphone actually comes up and over the screen on the vertical, and that's where I'll have the text. I know a lot of people like to have printed off versions of the books or information, and they're flipping through pages. You'll see a lot of videos of actors doing it that way and going through. But I found it just easier for me to have the digital book on the screen. And so I'll do the recordings, I'll record the full page, and then I'll pause, scroll up, and do another page. And usually by the time I found it perfect for me that by the time I have recorded one vertical screen's worth of information, I need to pause and take a sip or take a breath or, apply more lip balm or anything else just to get my mouth back to where it needs to be. Because that was one of the things early on is you get a lot of mouth clicks if you don't stay hydrated.
Right.
So go ahead.
That can actually be carried through the pop filter that a lot of voice actors have.
Yep, exactly. So I found it being real smooth for me to do one screen's worth. Then I'll pause my recording studio or my Audacity. I'll scroll up. I'll take a drink of water, apply some lip balm if I need to, and then be ready and take a breath to catch my breath, and then go to the next one. So it just seems really good for me.
How much time does it typically take to produce an audiobook from start to finish?
So that's a great question. That's probably my number one question that I get all the time. So by a good rule, it takes me about 4 total labor hours for one finished hour of audiobook. That's about average. There are some that can do it in less. It usually says between 3 to 6 labor hours. So I'll deep dive of where those 4 hours are coming from. So, and I usually don't count reading the book first. So we won't count the book because if it's just an hour-long book, I usually won't read it fully first, or if I will, I'll kind of just throw it into it. But so we'll take the reading out. So for recording an hour, it usually takes me about an hour and a half to record 1 hour's worth. Because if I'm going through and I'm recording a section, and let's just say it says the little boy went down to the woods to grab some water. That's the section. If I'm recording and I say the little boy went down to the little boy went down to the woods to get some water. So that section right there, that section would only be about 3 seconds, 4 seconds worth of text, but that right there took me about 10 seconds to say that. So by the time I edit it, so it takes me about an hour and a half to record an hour's worth of material. So that's an hour and a half. Then when I actually go in to edit it, it takes me about an hour and a half to edit that hour and a half down to an hour, down to the finished hour. So then now we're up to 3 hours for the final. And then it takes me an hour to listen to it one last time for final review. So that's usually where I say my 4 hours, 4 labor hours for one finished hour.
Were you surprised when I gave you about 3, almost 4 weeks to complete this?
It was a little tight, but it was the right, because I could do about, it was usually, it was a good, it wasn't too much and it wasn't, I didn't need more. Like it's one of those sections where it pushed me enough to make sure that I was stay focused, did the job, couldn't put it off. But at the same time, it was enough to where I felt comfortable and wasn't rushed. And that was one of the things you and I talked about was, I think you gave me a 4-week timeline. I put it down for a 3-week timeline to give us a week in case anything happened, in case we needed to go back and forth. I knew I had a personal trip that I had to take on. And we ended up, I think 2 days. I think we added 2 days from my original 3-week. So no, that was, it was a good one.
But of course, the final product was only about 13 hours, and I was guesstimating it would probably take about a month. But in actuality, would have taken less time depending on how it was done, because you did take that week off that you needed to, and it still got done like 2-3 days before it was due to begin.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm still gathering as much information as I can on, when I do a recording, or I do an audition and I get the contract for a book. If I'm looking at it of, all right, it's going to be this many hours, so it should really take me, this long to make that contract. But it also all depends on how many projects that I'd have going on at one time. When I first got it with you, when we were first doing that 15 minutes, the first 15 minutes, I was just finishing one audiobook and was working on another 15-minute, but that book ended up being only a 2-hour book. So yeah. I had basically finished my first 15 minutes with you, send it to you for for your review for that 15 minutes. Then I went back, finished that 2-hour book. And then right about the time that I finished that 2-hour book, you had given me the okay to go, the final approval for the 15 minutes. You and I had, those phone calls beforehand where we were on the same page. And then that way I could just focus on yours. I'm sure as you as the artist and producer and going through with your multiple avenues, it's like, all right, the project link also depends on how many other projects do I have going on right now. That could come into play as well. Luckily, I was able to finish all projects, focus on yours before I moved on to the other. So it just worked out really well.
You probably weren't expecting the project to be about 120,000 words, were you?
Not at the beginning. It does when you audition on ACX, it does tell you what the approximate numbers and approximate timeline it's going to be.
Yeah.
So, it gives me a good idea of it. It was one of the larger books that I had done. So, again, knowing exactly what the math was and how long it would take was still a learning curve for me, but it was a great learning opportunity to do it more on a large scale. And really get into that rhythm. I think the first week, there was a lot of going back and forth, a lot of learning for me, for you, learning the characters, making sure we're on the same page. And then, I think that first week we only went through maybe 3 or 4 chapters in that first week, but then the next 2.5 weeks went through the rest of them. So that's another thing I would tell anybody who's just getting started with this is, hey, on a book this length, that first week is going to be where a lot of the time is going to be, because you're learning the characters, you're getting into a rhythm, you're finding your traction. But as soon as you do, man, the rest of it just feels like it flies through.
How closely do you typically work with authors during the production process?
I've got some that are really close and some I don't talk to at all. There was the first couple ones where I would get them, I'd audition, there'd be no interaction during the audition. I would get the contract, sign the contract, I'd have the date, I would submit the first 15 minutes, I'd get the email saying that it was approved. A couple days later, I would submit the book, it would be approved, and that was it. never heard from them, no interaction, no emails, nothing. So we've got that side of the scale, and then we've got your side of the scale, which is, you were very involved early on, even during the auditions. I still remember the audition night where we went back and forth a couple times before you chose me and let me work on your project. And then we made the phone call beforehand, with a second phone call after we got started. Constant emails back and forth. And I felt like you were there, and I could see how some narrators wouldn't want the author to be as involved, because it's like, hey, this is my project, let me take it. But I could also see how some authors would be like, hey, this is my baby, you're going to do exactly what I want. I thought you and I had a very good relationship where, I would bounce ideas off of you and say, hey, I want to take it a direction, and you were on there. And then there's times I'm like, hey, I reached out to you and said, hey, where were you thinking on this? What did you? And you were very willing to work with. So I've seen both sides of the spectrum for that, of authors not wanting any involvement or authors wanting to be fully involved. I prefer communication. I would rather over communicate than under communicate. So you see both sides of it, and I've had experience with both.
What's the most rewarding part of working with authors on their audiobooks?
Just seeing me bring their characters to life and seeing their level of enthusiasm, their enjoyment. I mean, because you as an author, you've got that character that you brought to life on page. You took a character that was in your head, a story that was in your head, and at some point you said, man, this would be a really good book. I'm going to see if I can put it. So you've spent all this time and energy, you've put it to paper. But that whole time you've heard that character in your head and what they sound like and go through. And then when all of a sudden that character comes off the page and you're hearing them, every author has just been like, man, I loved that character even more when you put a voice to her, or it changes it, and it's so rewarding to see the authors, that sense of enjoyment of their characters that they brought to life, for me helping it that one extra step.
What advice would you give to someone looking to get into audiobook production?
Absolutely. So I would recommend recording yourself first. Doesn't even have to be on a software. You don't even have to have a microphone. The first thing that I ever did was I think I downloaded an app on my phone. Don't even remember what it was. It was just a recording app, and it recorded it, and I recorded myself reading. And that's what we'll talk about. Getting into how I got into being a voice actor, being a narrator. But the first thing you want to do is just record yourself. Record yourself. Doesn't have to be anything neat. Doesn't have to be anything professional. Just have fun with it. Record yourself. Get used to that. Get that feeling of, do I like the fact that I know I'm being recorded and somebody's going to listen to this? And then listen to yourself. And do you like it? It's like, man, I liked this, man. I could hear myself. That's really one of the big steps that took me from just an avid listener from audiobooks, into wanting to do this professionally. That was the first step. I had my wife, my son, just said, hey, you should record yourself and listen to it and see what you like it. So that would be what I would recommend to anybody just wanting to figure out, man, do I even want to do this? Would I enjoy this? Because you'll find out real quick if your phone is right in front of you, you're reading a book. Are you nervous? Are you shaking? Or you're like, man, are you really excited about it? Or you're like, man, I can't wait to hear about it. And it's going to tell you right off the bat if it's something that you would enjoy doing.
I've been asked if I would ever voice my own books in the future, and it's like, I barely have the voice for radio. I don't even know how people can stand my voice as is. Why would I narrate my own book?
Oh, no, I think it's whatever you have a passion for, right? Because anything that you could sit there and do, it's what you want to do, what you want to feel. And I think there's certain characters, I think there's certain books for everybody, to be able to do. So don't be afraid of it.
Aside from the whole VR aspect of it, when you were reading this book, what else spoke to you about it?
Yep. So I played World of Warcraft back in 2020 or 2003 when it first started. So I was it 2004?
Yeah, it was
That's right.
2004.
You're right. I started college in 2003, so it was my sophomore year in 2004 when it came out, and I almost flunked out of school because of it.
Oop.
Yeah, I played it day one. I think my character only got up to level 60. I was a druid tank, so druids have my heart. Loved being able to switch the animals. Bear was always my favorite. Always loved going into the bear form. But that was the other thing is, I played World of Warcraft, played Warcraft for a while too. Didn't really get too much into it. But I'm a fantasy book guy. I grew up on Lord of the Rings. I mentioned the Aragon series. Even all of those. Heck, even my wife got me into the Twilight series for a while, but I loved it. It's just that fantasy world that I've always loved, and then the video game aspect of it as well. So when you took virtual reality, you took World of Warcraft, you took all of these things, and then something I don't know even that I've told you, then what really drove it home for me was when the characters each started to have their own real world backgrounds, real world life issues that each one was having to, fight with and contend with. And, a lot of them, I have family members around that could relate, very much so. My son was diagnosed. He is on the autistic scale. So that really resonates with me. So there's a lot of that. A lot of the mental issues that I've had in my past. So what really got to it was like, man, these characters are real. These characters are real. You can really feel them. It's like it's my roommate. It's like it's my roommate from college. It's like it's my wife. And then all of us. So that's really what was grabbed me at the beginning. And then still remember to this day when Divus showed up and said, "Hey, by the way, none of this is real," and that simulation theory kicked in. That's when I was like, "Man, I'm hooked. All right, let's see where this goes." I was like, "All right, now I'm all in," because completely understood it, completely could see it, could visualize it, understood where it was going, and absolutely loved it from then on out. So that's really what got me excited about it.
I was told that I focused too heavily on a lot of the disabilities in the first half, and it's like, well, that's part of the point. But at the same time, would you believe that this book actually started out as a concept for a fan fiction from a character's point of view in World of Warcraft?
I could. You and I talked about that. I absolutely could because of how deep it went. I loved every minute of it. Yeah, there were times where it's not necessarily the characters because again, each time it went into it, I was like, all right, you're building up that rapport, you're building up that relationship, you're building up that character. Yeah, there were times where it's like, all right, this one we've probably heard it, we knew it, so we probably didn't need it as much. But again, I am big with lots of information in the first book, because then you don't need any of it in the second, third, and fourth books. You can focus on the action. You can focus on the storyline.
In this book series was originally planned to be 6 books.
Okay.
But I was told you need to write longer books. So I took the first 2 books, made it 1 book, and I'm working on the next 2 as 1 book. Even then, based on the titles themselves, it's going to reflect on the technology within the books. If you look, the first book is called Virtual Requiem.
Okay.
VR.
Mm-hmm.
The second book is going to be Altered Reflections. AR.
Yep.
How many people have actually experienced the technology of an alternate reality, or not artificial reality? Augmented reality.
Augmented reality.
Yes.
Yep.
Where everything that you see in the living space can be altered in front of you.
Well, you've already introduced that in book 1 when they would, I mean, to an extent, when they would start to have their visions changed, right? When their realities were changed. Now yours was a full virtual. Well, now if all of a sudden just what they're seeing is something in front of them, you still see this desk that's in front of me. I still see everything. But if all of a sudden, an alien starts walking across the desk, on my desk in this reality, that's when you start to get into that augmented reality, where it's just that one or two elements that are introduced into your reality, not the whole thing. So it's going to be very intriguing to see where you take it. I'm excited.
And of course, the final book is called Ascension's Integration.
Ascension's Integration, so AI.
Yes.
Okay, so now it's coming back to where does all this wrap up into, and where does the artificial, or whatever you want to call artificial, whatever artificial is, where does that come into play to finish it out?
Yes, it's the artificial trilogy, and I figured I've thrown bits and pieces in between each section of books that show the reality of everything that's happening beyond what people realize. Well, what if everyone got a chance to see that reality for itself?
There you go. Okay, that makes sense. And that's going to be an intriguing story of where it can be, and lots of options of where you could take it.
Yes.
That's exciting.
The great thing is I don't plan any of it. It just comes out of nowhere, and it all works in the end.
That's great.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'll just say and again, this goes back to how did I get started with this? How did I get into it? And again, I've told you, mentioned that I was an avid book reader and avid audiobooks. And one of the first ones that I ever fell in love with was Jim Dale's rendition of Harry Potter, the Harry Potter series. That's really where changing the voices, changing the voice styles. I've got an acting background. I was in vocal performance, so I've got a singing background as well. Stage production, singing is really where I was in vocal music in college at Oklahoma State University my first year. So that's really where the articulation, the controlling of the voice, the sounds, the not being afraid to be in front of a crowd or hearing my voice, doing all that stuff. That's really the real background. But then listening all through college to Jim Dale with the Harry Potters, and so Harry Potter and Jim Dale. That was the first one where it's like I got introduced to audiobooks and the really in-depth character voices, because he is the best at what he does. He's the best of the best. And so what happened was about where I started reading. My son turned 10 years old, and I started reading Harry Potter to him out loud every night before we went to bed. So we'd shut off all TV, shut off all phones, and just me, my wife, my son, and the dogs sitting on the couch. And I would read the Harry Potter series out loud to them. But I would do the voice changes. I would change my voice and really have a whole lot of fun with it, all the way from Hagrid's deep voice to Dobby's voice. That's really where I started to fall in love with it, and say, man, I really like doing this. I love doing the voices. I could just see my son and my wife, who normally aren't big readers and definitely are not audiobook readers or audiobook listeners, to see their faces and how their emotions. I could control their emotions with my voice, the way I presented it. I could make the scary portions scary. I could make the love portions love. That was really where I was like, all right, I can control people's emotions with this. And that I loved doing it. I felt confident doing it. I felt good at it. And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm just going to record myself doing a session of it, and listen to it. And I was like, oh, that actually sounds pretty good. And then, so that I had that background, but you never think, hey, how can I do this? How do I get into this? Right. It's like, all right, you're good at it, but how do you get into it? And then I worked during my daytime job. I had a client of mine that found out he was an author. And I asked him one day, I said, hey, do you happen to do audiobooks for your books? And he goes, yeah, it's actually pretty easy. Why are you interested? And I said, yeah, I'm interested in doing this because of my background. And he introduced me to ACX. And he was like, just go to ACX, do your research, It says there's a new narrator, new to this. It'll have videos. It'll tell you what you need. It'll tell you what you need to buy. And he said, so he's the one that introduced me to ACX. And then, like I said, and then ACX, for those listening and those interested in getting into it, try it. It is so easy, super easy from the narrator position. You just go in there, you sign up, it's free. You create a profile. And then there are so many videos, so many recordings of what to do, how to do it, training videos, step-by-steps. It gives you links for the top 4 or 5 recording and editing softwares, and just, pick the one that you like. And then from there, it walks you through step-by-step of how to audition. The audition process is really easy from the narrator position, to find the books, to find the audio scripts, to record them and then submit them. It does really well. I'm sure from an author standpoint, I'm sure you've mentioned on it or could mention on it, but from a narrator standpoint, it's very user-friendly, real easy to get into real fast, and it can take off. So that's what really got me into it, my storyline behind it. And I encourage anybody who's ever read it, enjoys talking, enjoys reading, listening, anybody that's ever said, man, I really like your voice, or thought it could be a thing, go try it. It's super easy.
It can actually be difficult even on the author side, when looking for producers, because here's the thing. There's 3 different ways to finance a project, and it varies on how much you can actually carry yourself. First, you have people that will actually ask for an upfront fee, and that'd be it. It'd be based on hours done. Then you have some people who will do not only the upfront fee, but also a portion of the royalties. That one will guarantee you some higher end people. But then you have people like myself that can only afford the 50-50 royalties, and you will still get people auditioning, but not a lot of them will actually stay. That's the unfortunate part, because you could try and hire them. It's like, oh, I found someone else, and it's like so hard because they can refuse your offer in the end.
Yeah, and it's the same 3 for the producer side. It's the same way that I looked at it. Early on, I recommend going for the royalty share ones. For those just starting out, just like you said, the author, typically you get more of the new authors, or the first ones, and you get a lot of those, or just don't have the financial backing for that. But again, those are usually the first ones that you'll start out with. Those are the ones that I started out with. But again, you're building your resume, you're building your background, you're building your experience. So for new authors, it's a difficult, profession, just like acting, just like anything else, to get into those full paid ones, still building into it. And you luck into it. So, what I do is I'll go for some of the paid ones when I've got some projects or finishing up some projects. But if I need a project to work on, then we'll go for the royalty shares. But for me, right now, I do it more on the books that I want to do. Right now, for me personally, it's the ones that I can get emotionally attached to. Because right now I love doing this. This is, it's more than a hobby, because I do it for, to make the money and to grow it. And I do want this to become a full-time 100% profession for me. So that is still the goal, but I'm still in this. I'm not necessarily just starting out, but I still love it. It's still a passion for me. So a lot of the ones that I'll go for, if I'm going for the paid ones, those are just, I'll go for ones that I think would be a good fit, because they are more of a talent pool. It's very difficult. And a lot of those authors usually have they have a voice in mind of exactly what they want the producer to sound like. So I could do the absolute best rendition of it, absolute thing that it would be, oh my God, this would be the next best thing. But if it wasn't what the author had pictured in their mind, then it's, it doesn't matter. I get quite a bit of those where I ask for feedback, even if I'm denied the audition. And a lot of it I get is, man, you were absolutely awesome. It just wasn't quite the voice that I was envisioning. And then when I go back and listen to them, it's usually a producing voice that I couldn't match. So I don't feel bad about those. It's like, just sometimes you have that to where the author just has that exact tone, that exact character in mind. But I look at those as the professional ones. That is just like whatever I could get, I'll take. And if the author says yes, we'll do it. But for the royalty shares or the partials, those are the ones where I just have a passion for it because I love doing it. And those I can spend a little extra time, and those I don't spend, just like your project. Loved the interaction with the author, loved the interaction with the character. Usually I get a little bit more say in where the direction that I want to take it. I usually get a little bit more creative freedom. Mm-hmm. And I get more interactions with the author, the better interactions with the author. Those are usually the ones where I'm like, oh my God, this was so amazing. Oh my God, I loved that character, and now I love it even more for that. So I encourage those just getting started to go for those. And then you'll get those ones where you negotiate. I've had ones where it was a royalty share, but I said, hey, with this one, I'd like to get a little bit upfront. Can we do kind of that? Hey, I'll take a little bit more upfront, and we'll take a little bit off of the royalty. And it worked out great. It did well. So those three are the difficult. I will tell you, the more you're going to get paid upfront, the more the more challenges. Oh, what's it called? You have other great producers going for it, because usually those are the ones going for it as well.
Mm-hmm. And see, it's really, as a writer working with ACX, when you're looking for people to voice your audiobook, you have to be as open as you can. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you really want in the end. Because if you say you're looking for something specific, good luck actually getting people to audition for your book.
Yeah, that's very interesting to see it, because I've seen it multiple ways where when an author puts their book on, they could have, there's a lot of the royalty share onlys, it just has the excerpt that says, here it is, download the script, audition for it and go. No notes on the character, no background on the story. It's got the back of the book synopsis of it on for all of them. That's on all of them. So you at least get the background. But some of them have zero knowledge of what's going on, the background of the character, what they envision, anything like that. Then you've got the flip side, where I've had one that it was 4 pages of background character analysis that says, this is Leo. He is 53 and a half years old. He was in the military for 7 years. He smoked for 8 years, but has been not smoking for a year. His mother disowned him when he was 7. I have Henry Cavill as my visual. I have Tom Cruise as my vocal. And, it's like, and it goes in through just page after page of what these characters, the background stories of them, and of exactly what they're looking for. Now, those are few and far between, but I have seen them to where it gets so in depth with the character background. But then you'll see it to where the other thing that you'll see is sometimes there'll be a 30-second audition where it's just a couple of lines and that's it. It takes me about 30 seconds to audition for it. Then there's others, I've seen others put their entire book onto the audition script. And you're like, what portion do you want me to read? Right? And usually you want it to be between 2 to 5 minutes is pretty average. I know that's a big window, but it all depends on how much you go through. But usually what I'll try to find is, if there's any characters at all, you want to make sure that you're voicing them. Any of the narration, the narrator going through, and then if there's any of those pauses, those breaks. So usually then, as a producer, you're trying to find which best section that represents you, because you have 2.5 minutes to prove your worth to the author, right? And what I say, it's usually within the first 15 seconds, you know whether or not you want to listen to the rest of it. I'm sure, Matthew, as you've heard, that first 15 seconds tells you a lot,
Right.
right?
And let me tell you something from my point of view. They actually limited how many words you can actually use for the script. It's like I didn't even get
Good.
through the entire section of Dr. Roberts before it actually made me stop.
So I'm wondering, I've got to go back in and look, because some of them, there is a portion where you put it in
Mhm.
on their stuff. And I'm sure that's what it was, is you entered it there. Because what I have to do is I have to go in there, copy what you put, and then paste it into Microsoft Word. That's usually what I'll do. But others, it gets me a link to a PDF. And then you can put the entire PDF on there. I think that's the portion where they just put, instead of doing what you should, which is just give me a section that you want to hear. It should have the narrator. It should have an exciting portion that has change in tone of voice, and it should have the characters that you're most worried about. What am I going to sound like? What are they going to sound like when this reader talks? Right? Those are really what I would put on there as an author, because that's really, as a producer, those are what I want to show you. But again, within the first 15 seconds, I'm sure you're listening. Was it professionally done? That's the first biggest thing. Is I listen to a lot of these auditions just myself going through, and I'm like, you hear cars in the background, you hear them half stopping, they're either joking around, laughing, they stop mid sentence. So that first 15 seconds, I try to say, all right, or within that 30 seconds, what do you need to hear? Because I don't think a 5-minute section, for me, I think it's too much, because, and that's one of my frustrations, is I think the last 30 to 45 seconds are the best of a 5-minute audition that I just did. Then I'm just like, man, I just hope they get to that last 30 seconds. So that's coming. That's one of the frustrations from my side that I see with a lot of auditions, that if I see just a long book that's just 7 minutes of narration, of just narrator with no voice characters, that's ones where I'll usually flip and I'm just like, no, I'll just pass on it. So that's another thing to keep in mind from an author standpoint, is you got to catch the narrator, those good professional narrators that want to give you the best, especially being able to change to characters, give them that opportunity.
And I'll even take things a step further. Sometimes is if I like what I'm hearing, I want to see if I can make you better, because that not only helps me in the long run, but it could also help you out as well.
Absolutely, Matthew. What you did with my auditions, my 3 auditions with you, if I could draw it up like that every single time, it was amazing, because you told me, hey, you obviously you liked what you heard enough, but you said, man, I just wish it was slightly different, right? I think, you said slightly slower. So it was like, hey, that's perfect. That's professional feedback. And to be honest, if you had just told me that and I never heard from you again, I would have had so much respect for you at that moment, especially early on in a career, learning, just getting that feedback.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for anybody listening, it's, if you get feedback, don't be afraid to go back at it, right? Because what did I do right after you sent me that feedback? I submitted another one. I took your feedback. I took it honest. Didn't take it to heart, didn't get upset at it, didn't get frustrated. I was like, man, that's great feedback. Let me try that. I went back, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And you and I were going back and forth. You gave me that feedback. I was getting ready to shut it off. I was getting ready to go to bed. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a chance, and I'm going to go re-record this for this author who was fantastic, gave me feedback that for a project that I felt passionate about, and re-recorded it, sent it back to you. Not only did you listen to it for the second time, you gave me a second pair of feedback. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing, because he's giving me feedback. He's helping me develop. He's being responsive. And again, was getting ready to shut off my computer. Didn't think I'd hear back from you. And you responded back with a secondary feedback. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to stay up and do this, because now you've got me, not only do you have me passionate about the book, you now have me passionate about you as an author. because you're giving me feedback, you're giving me constructive feedback, you're responsive, you're giving me the ability to say, hey, listen, I'm a professional actor. And what voice actors do and what actors do is they change, right? It's like, hey, I didn't quite like it that way. Instead of going to find somebody else who does it perfectly a different way, ask me if I can do it that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so for all those authors out there, if you hear that tone, but in its quick audition, you're just like, man, I like that tone, but I wish he had changed that character to be a little bit lower of a voice, a little bit lower tone, or I envision him being slightly slower and more mononical. Don't be afraid to send, that information back to a producer to say, hey, I liked your audition, but I envisioned Mr. Brown having a slightly darker tone. Do you mind resubmitting one with that? Because, and that what that's going to do for you as an author right then and there is, yes, it may not be the perfect one right there, but is that producer willing to take constructive feedback that you want and has the ability to change and adapt to what you are? Because that is so huge in our profession, is given that opportunity. And we don't see that often enough.
Right.
And so that was I still tell the story of that audition interaction between you and I, you and myself. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and it set the tone for our communication for the rest of it. It just made it so easy to communicate the back and forth between it, and it was just absolutely fantastic.
And it actually gave me a chance to talk about the book with you that allowed you to understand my thought process with characters, with scenes and whatnot, and how to actually tackle them whenever you're speaking about it.
Yeah, no, and that is huge. I'd say for any job more than a couple of hours, or any job that is not pretty, I did one of my favorite ones that I did was it's called David's Having Distractions. It was a fourth grader that had ADHD. So I played a fourth grader, and the author there was the same way. She was interactive, she told me, but she had a lot more freedom with it, but we had that communication. And so anytime you can get that communication, it sets the tone, whether it's good, bad, ugly, a change in direction, keep going with it. Having that open dialogue between the producer and the author is just so important, especially on these larger novels.
And that wraps up this episode of LPA Presents. I want to give a huge thank you to Matthew Harlin for joining us today and sharing his insights into the world of audiobook production. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure to dive into this creative process behind our project, and I hope you all enjoyed the behind-the-scenes look. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, everyone.
To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in for your continued support throughout this season. We've had some incredible conversations, and I can't wait to bring you even more in the next season. Until then, stay inspired, stay creative, and I'll see you back here soon on LPA Presents.